how much money they have, their gender, their age, pretty much everything else. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So racism is entirely based on their race. Discrimination is treating them differently for any other reason. Because they're Irish instead of Scottish, or because they're poor and that's lame, according to some people. Because they're women and we can oppress them. Because they're young so they're not experienced enough, or they're too old and they're a burden on society. You kind of see how people get treated differently? Yeah, awesome. So, what is the minority then? What is a minority?
Someone more powerful than the other. Like whites would be more powerful than blacks.
Yeah, good. So discrimination is usually people picking on minorities, which basically just means either that they have less people. So like, if you go to an all-girls school, but there are some male teachers, females are definitely the majority and males are definitely the minorities, okay? But it can also mean set apart, looked down on. So minorities can also be, like you said, white versus black, or, Irish over Mexican, or, things like that. Like one thing saying like, you guys are the minority, so you get less. You get nothing, we get everything. Kind of like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So, how is both racism and discrimination different than social Darwinism? Not social Darwinism, segregation. That's what I meant.
How is what and what?
How are racism and discrimination different than segregation? You know that word?
No.
Okay. So segregation means separating, essentially. So when we talk about segregation in our history, it's usually when we talk about how African Americans used to sit in they have to sit in a different section of the bus, or they have to drink out of a different water fountain, or they have to go to a different bathroom. So it's basically separating groups, or separating people or groups based on either racism or discrimination of some kind. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, there was actually a couple cases that look into this section right here, racism, discrimination, and segregation. The first one was called, let me just check myself, yep, Plessy versus Ferguson. This one happened in 1896. And what happened here, the big key term is that it was decided that you could separate people but still call them equal. So after slavery went down and we couldn't do that anymore, people still went about segregating and being discriminatory of people of different races and different backgrounds and things like that. And this court case made that okay. It said they can consider themselves equal human beings, but we can still separate them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Then, several years later, this got fixed by something called Brown versus Board of Education. And that happened in 1954. So you see a lot of years went down where this was still considered okay to do.
Mm-hmm.
But Brown versus Board said separate is not equal. Equality means we can drink out of the same water fountain. Equality means we can sit in the same restaurant. Any questions on that?
No.
Okay. And then we're just going to talk about social Darwinism. Do you have any ideas as far as what that means?
No.
Okay. So when you hear Darwin, do you think of evolution?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the same thing whenever we talk about it, whether it's in psychology, science, sociology in this case. It just means evolution. Do you know what evolution means?
Changing of something?
Yeah. So it's basically the survival of the fittest. We adapt to fit in the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if it's survival of the fittest, it would literally say that the way we treat races and the way we discriminate and the way we segregate and even how we did slavery was all because we believed that it was survival of the fittest. And socially, we needed to be on top.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. And then last but not least is something called pluralism, which is kind of the anti to all of this. So what do you think that means?
Accepting everyone?
Kind of, yeah. So pluralism is basically saying that good things come from diversity. Like, it used to be that we segregated everybody in America, and now we're known as like the melting pot because of all these different races and ethnicities that we have within America. And we've seen that that makes everybody's culture richer, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So pluralism says more is good.
More is good.
Okay?
Okay.
All right, any questions on any of this?
No, I think I'm good on